Tarik LaCour, and we also have Stephen Gotti from Fanatic Perspective joining us today on the Hook 'em Horn Show. We're talking a little bit of fall camp, expectations for the upcoming football season. Going to touch on 2024 recruiting here as well. There's a lot to talk about with fall camp starting on August 2nd. What is it, 8 days away now? That's crazy. It seems like the summer went by really, really fast. And, a month after fall camp begins, we have the season here. So it's coming up really fast, and I'm really excited. Steven, we're really thrilled to have you on the show. Like a lot of the work that you do on YouTube, you have a good audience, good discussion. You have a lot of good conversation over on your channel. So welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, fellas. It's a pleasure to be on. And like you said, Andrew, football's right around the corner. Can't wait to discuss.
Absolutely. And, I think we can start here with fall camp being a week away. I think that we're headed into fall camp kind of with a clean slate, if you will. I mean, most of the players that had any sort of injuries, knock on wood, yep, I was about to do that. Most of the players that are dealing with injuries, it seems like they're on the right track. I don't like to get too much hype around this, but it's good to see him back on the right track. Isaiah Nayor, I think that picture made its rounds around social media with him looking really good without the brace. And if you actually follow him on IG, during the summer, and the spring, he tends to post a lot of training videos that he does with his personal trainer. And even before then, you can see him working out without the brace. And so there's been multiple instances of him looking good there. Outside of that, sounds like Catalan's on the right track. DJ Campbell's doing better with the wrist injury. There's still a lot of guys that seem to be on the right track that either came up with injuries as far back as last fall or during the spring. So, what are y'all's expectations heading into fall camp, knowing that, there is so much expectations around this team?
I think from a depth standpoint, to the names you mentioned, and we can even keep in mind the people you're mentioning are guys that are either starters or guaranteed to play in our 2 deep, right? So, we can add in 2 more names, Jonathan Brooks, right? Where we, getting him back healthy, Cole Hudson, getting him back healthy, guys that are going to be, when you think about Cole Hudson, DJ Campbell, Hayden Connor, and Jake Majors and what that interior of the offensive line looks like, that's something that I've had as one of my 3 keys to successful season over on Fanatic Perspective. And you guys have hit it on this channel here as well in terms of what those positional battles look like. So having those guys back healthy affects Jonathan Brooks, right? There's a lot of questions. If you think about pressure on guys going into a camp or just outright, does anybody have more pressure than Jonathan Brooks has to replace Bijan Robinson as starting running back at the University of Texas, considering who the previous person was, right? And so I think the best fighting chance is having those folks back. One other tidbit on Nayor, and I'm glad you mentioned the lack of brace that he's practicing with. All very encouraging. I think the best thing, though, is that this staff has done a tremendous job recruiting and putting this roster together via the transfer portal, via recruiting, to where we're still not going to have to depend on Isaiah like that, especially to start the season. We can still move him along. If he's ready sooner than expected, fantastic. If he needs a little bit more to get up to speed, you still have guys like A.D. Mitchell and tons of depth there as he gets ramped up. So I think I'm thrilled to get into camp because there's some heavy battles that are really going to be indicative of how this season goes for us.
Yeah, I agree on the front that just there's not, well, it is an interesting point because there's not that many guys on the offensive side of the ball that have that much pressure to replace anyone. So on that front, Jonathan Brooks is on an island. And I'll pose a question a little bit later to y'all that I think is interesting that I kind of had pop in my head earlier today. But also, Stephen, to your point of Isaiah Nayor not having to be rushed back, that's huge. I mean, having A.D. Mitchell on the outside in and of itself is a luxury. But now having Isaiah Nayor, two guys that are capable of being not just all Big 12 caliber receivers, but potential top 2 or 3 round picks in the NFL draft in the future. And so, excellent point there. But yeah, anyway, Tarik, what are some of your thoughts heading into fall camp?
I'm happy with the health and the depth of the team. This is probably the best health-wise and depth-wise we've been in about a decade plus. Obviously, Stephen mentioned who's got the biggest kind of target on their back in Jonathan Brooks. I think it's Quinn Ewers, actually, because he's really going to dictate whether the season's good, great, or, well, let's not talk about that. So that we'll see if it, and but it's been encouraging to hear that he's really become the leader, and guys like Jordan Whittington, a fifth-year senior, saying, "Hey, when he speaks, we listen." Xavier Worthy saying he's the head of the snake, things like that. Those are all important things that he's got the team behind him and he can lead that. But now it's, can he get the ball out consistently on third down? Can he get to his second and third read? Those types of things. Can he scramble when the yards are there? And also, this is another thing. He needs to learn to slide better. Like, his slides are just odd when he does it. I'm just like, ooh. Anyway, because it's more like he's falling down rather than sliding. But that's more of a he'll learn that fine.
Do you remember on like I don't know if y'all played the video game NCAA Football 14, but if you tried to slide with the quarterback,
yes,
they dove forward and sometimes would injure themselves or fumble the ball. It almost feels like that.
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah, but I'm really excited to see what Jalen Catalon will bring to the back end of the defense. Getting more turnovers will be even more of an essence now because you're losing an entire possession with the way the clock rules are changing, more or less. So lots to see there. In addition to Jonathan Brooks, who I think is going to be a stud, I want to see what CJ Baxter is going to do. Is he going to be the solid number 2, getting a lot of the carries? And how does that factor with guys like Keelan Robinson and others? Isaiah Nair, of course, we love to see him, but we don't have to depend on him, which is great. And a person that's kind of an X factor that a lot of people are not talking about is going to be Gunnar Helm, because I think he's going to still be very important. Can he take it like another step? Will we use 12 personnel, which Sark is still going to use? I mean, we'll base him on at 11. But if Gunnar Helm becomes a more reliable receiver, I think that's going to help tremendously. So those are my thoughts right now. And like you said, I can't believe that it's finally here.
Yeah. And I like you bringing up the whole like Quinn Ewers, Jonathan Brooks debate on offense. I have a similar question. This is what I wanted to pose to y'all. I don't want this to be like a leading question at all, but I just more toward like Quinn Ewers' growth. Do y'all think that, Bijan and Roschon being gone now, do you think that actually plays to Quinn's benefit? We've heard him mention a couple of times that it's a luxury for him to have Bijan back there, that, he always has a guy that he can rely on. But now he has to be the guy there. He has to take that next step forward and be able to shoulder the load for the offense. He doesn't have anyone that can kind of be like the safety blanket for him. Do y'all think that's ultimately a good thing? I know that losing Bijan Robinson is never a good thing in and of itself, but just for Quinn's growth.
For a growth standpoint, I think the good thing is it started with those 15 practices as well as the bowl game against Washington, since they were not physically there practicing and obviously participating in the bowl game. And I think you started to see a glimpse of what this offense would look like in a post Bijan Roschon world. For better or for worse, we got to see it, right? So now after those practices, after kind of working through those things, now adding in more personnel, you have a spring game. I think you now have a better idea of how we will play football under the leadership of Quinn Ewers. One of the things I've been harping on is, as a quarterback, and that's part of your growth regardless of personnel, is taking ownership of the offense. We talk a lot about Quinn's body, the injury. There's all these things we talk about from last season, but the reality is he was a transfer, okay? And he transferred into an offense that is very, very complicated. Complicated in the sense that I've said this before, Sark is running an AP level, master levels course for quarterbacks. Now, when one grasps that system, and we've seen that in the past over Sark's career, it's as deadly as can be, and it's as dynamic as can be. And Sark honestly has shown glimpses of that regardless, whether it's Casey Thompson, whether it's Hudson Card, whether it's Quinn Ewers. They've all had flashes under Sark's brilliance. But now that Quinn has had time to really be here and understand, Sark talks about, yeah, you may know the play, you may know what we're trying to run, but do you understand the intent? Do you understand why I'm calling this play? Do you understand why I'm asking you to read it this way? And then you growing the freedom to help us out at the line of scrimmage, because that in itself will help a lot of the woes we saw, especially in the second half as teams adjust or you're on the road. I expect Quinn Ewers to be better, in the second half, just like he kind of started to show even in the bowl game against Washington. I think we all agree, whether plays are executed or not, he was much sharper in the second half, and he seemed to start to take a little bit more ownership, holding teammates accountable. Some of those things you just forced to do it. And so I think that, to your point, Andrew, with those guys not being there, Quinn does not have a choice. Neither does Sark, because Sark needs to, he's supposed to be the quarterback guru. He's supposed to be the quarterback whisperer. He's got to make Tarik, there's just as much pressure on Sark to make Quinn look good as there is on Quinn to perform. I think it's a two-way street in terms of the pressure there.
It's very true, yeah, because even last year you saw some instances of Sark drawing up some really crazy plays to get, to scheme Worthy or Robinson open. I use the Oklahoma State game as a good example where you had this, what was that, a really, really nice little kind of Q route out to kind of like a little bubble screen. I don't know, it was a weird play, but with that early game 20-yard touchdown to Worthy. But then it kind of seemed like Sark didn't have any answers to figure out how to get Ewers back in a good rhythm after that. And so that's a good point. I like that you bring up Sark there too, because yeah, it's true. He's got to find a way to have the confidence that Ewers can lead them down the field rhythmically.
It's a relationship. It's a relationship. They're getting to know each other. They're getting to work with each other. So in that relationship, as a coach, Sark also not having a whole bunch of time with Quinn Ewers, and then Quinn Ewers losing time. Sometimes as a coach, it's like, oh, you know what? I didn't know he could handle that. Or I didn't know how to. Now he's been with him. They've been behind closed doors. They've been through some battles. They've had some success. They've had their downs. They should both be so much more comfortable with one another when they get in those stressful, difficult moments again. I'm sorry, Tarik. I didn't mean to talk over you.
No, I'm glad you brought up the Sark thing. This is the year we kind of find out, did Texas make the right hire in many ways.
It's true. Yeah. I guess moving on here, we're already kind of talking about expectations and thoughts for the season. One of the things that I mentioned to you all off camera that I wanted to cover was talking about some of the biggest trap games upcoming for the season. I think Texas has a really good opportunity to not only win the Big 12, but, really push for some level of national contention here. But to do that, Texas has to win these games that, you might get a commanding first half lead, or, you figure that they shouldn't be playing down to the competition. You think of games like Texas Tech, Iowa State, Oklahoma State last season, where Texas should have handily won those games, I think. And so, looking at the schedule this year, I think there's any number of ways you can go for trap. At Iowa State, Tarik, I know you mentioned that earlier. That's one that's always going to stick out to me, is Iowa State on the road in November. That's going to be a cold game, probably going to be a night game. That's never easy. Iowa State's probably the first one up for me, and then the second one is probably either Kansas or Baylor early in the season, depending on how you want to define Kansas as a trap game. What are y'all's trap games for the season?
You basically said everybody's a trap game. So like I said earlier, I think that Iowa State playing there later in the year, it's going to be cold, most likely going to be a night game. Matt Campbell will have that one circled because that's the game that's been making him such a hot coaching candidate, is winning that game and the Oklahoma games year in and year out. And but I guess the real trap game for me, and this is not just my Mormon bias coming out, it's going to be BYU. Not because there's like any real reason that like on paper why I say you worry about BYU. It's the fact that if you look through the history of BYU, especially the last 10 years or so, they always find a way to win a game that they really shouldn't have won. So yeah, that game's very close, near and dear to my heart, and has me worried. Also, Texas fans will never. I've never seen a quarterback run over a team the way Taysom Hill ran over Texas.
I believe it took you this long to talk about BYU till you got to Taysom Hill, brother. Do you know?
I was trying not to, raise blood pressure. It's not good for Africa.
You got to rip the Band-Aid off, man. Just bring up Taysom Hill right away.
I was just like, man.
But BYU, the other thing with the BYU game, Tarik, is that's the Sark Bowl.
Oh,
that's
yeah.
Sark Bowl.
Yes.
They actually talked about that with him at Big 12 Media Day.
Yeah, I saw
because we know Sark used to light it up at BYU as their starting quarterback, man. Sark was nice in the mid-'90s. Tore up A&M, for those who may not remember.
But see,
he had almost 500 yards on A&M.
But that adds more nervousness, though, because Sark tends to not play well against teams that he's like coached or played at before.
Well, Tarik, this is the year we got to answer to those things. This is the year we atone for those if we're Coach Steve Sarkisian, Tarik.
Yes,
because that leads me into my trap game. Is Houston. I'm gonna be very clear about this. Okay, the history between the two schools is why I'm saying this. I understand Houston's over/under is like 4.5 wins, and people are just completely writing them off. I don't know what the hell is going on with Dana Holgorsen there at the program. But what I do know is anytime Texas has gone up to Houston, it has been one of those. And actually, the rare times that these schools have hooked up, there have been some legendary games and legendary moments, especially going back to the previous conference affiliations. And there's a lot of history there. And so I think one of the things is when Texas goes, because Texas is going to be on the road, and granted, it's in state, that region, Houston's an area that, recruiting wise, we pay a lot of attention to, obviously, and really, again, feeling that smoke of battle leaving the Big 12 as they come into the Big 12. I think that's going to be an interesting feeling. If Texas is as good as we think they can be, then they should be able to finish and win that football game. But this is also the test to see if Texas is up here mentally. I mean, to Andrew's point about the blown leads last year, even some of the games they won, I mean, Kansas State, they won on the road. They figured it out. They were up 31-10 halfway through the third quarter. Some of these teams, they were like beating the hell out of them, right? And so can we finish? Have we developed that mental fortitude to overcome some of those things and to go on the road and curb stomp somebody? That's what we're looking to see in year 3, and that's why I have Houston as a trap game for me.
It's an interesting point, especially with like Dana Holgorsen. I think he's going to come in with a chip on his shoulder coming back into the Big 12. I'll be honest too, being an Oklahoma State grad for undergrad, always seeing Dana Holgorsen's forehead vein pop every single Saturday. There's just something about it. I don't mean to cause the guy stress, but he's something.
That's a college football staple, that Dana Holgorsen forehead.
Yeah, and I don't mean to keep getting off track here. I thought this was cool too. I always liked this book. It took me until like a year or two ago to realize this. I have this West Coast offense book that if you guys see closely here, the quarterback on the cover is Steve Sarkisian.
Look at our head coach.
Yeah. It's like an old like 90s football West Coast offense book, but the forward's by Lavelle Edwards. It's got like some testimonials from Andy Reid. It's like a super old school offense thing, like the 90s. I think it's cool. But yeah, I do like your point there, Steven. Until I think we're still in that prove it phase for Sark, where until he proves otherwise that he can actually win on the road, that I think we're gonna have some question marks there. To be fair, too, I think he's done pretty well at getting the job done at home against unranked opponents. I mean, we had some close calls in the last 2 years, sure, and some casualties, but I think it's headed in the right direction, especially at home. So Tarik, yours was BYU. I think my biggest trap game is Iowa State, and then Steven, you said yours was Houston. So okay, we got some variation there. I like that. Um, Next topic I kind of wanted to talk about here. We're already talking about the season. Steven, when we did our collab with Nick from Nino's Corner, we looked at the Big 12 win totals for the season. I believe Texas was at 9.5. I went with the over. Tark, I got to. Yeah, you had to go on with the over. You're too optimistic to not. And then Steven, what are your pick? What is your pick for that?
Saying 10-2 for this season, so that would, yeah, that would put me at the over. My only has nothing to do with the roster. Again, it's just the mental fortitude of the whole football team, starting with the head coach, but all the way down. Because Texas right now, I believe, is going to be favored 11 out of 12 games, right? So just that alone, we just want to see that consistency. But with what they have there and the depth, Tarik hit on the depth earlier, the depth that Texas has now, they can't be scared to be we as fans should not be scared to call the over with what this roster looks like. We know what football looks like across the country, talent wise, and we all follow recruiting and we've seen guys develop. We know the returning production we have. When you look at Xavier Worthy and Jatavian Sanders, even in their own positions, they're some of the most productive returning players in college football. Kelvin Banks at his position, Jalen Ford at his position, Jahdae Barron at his position. That's a lot of names I just mentioned, right? And so at some point, it's just like we got to meet expectations. And I think saying 10, which will go over that, obviously that 9.5, I think that's a fair expectation for Texas.
It's fair. It's just like you said, do they finally convert on it? I'm gonna pull the conversation back a little bit to fall camp again. We got fall camp about a week away here, so we can kind of bring this back to center. I did an article on the site over at Hook'em Headlines today talking about some newcomers that could be breakout players in fall camp. We also did a video a couple weeks ago where Shane and I literally broke down every single newcomer, all 30 among the high school recruits and transfer portal guys. So I think it's interesting to kind of look at some of the breakout players for Texas in fall camp. I kind of define a breakout player as anyone who either hasn't gotten the job done consistently yet for Texas or just at the FBS level, or just someone that's going to exceed expectation to the degree where they move up on the depth chart or make a significant impact for Texas heading into the season. That said, because I put A.D. Mitchell on my newcomers that could break out, I think that saying he's a breakout player is just kind of an obvious point to a lot of people. If I'm looking at the entire team, though, not just the newcomers, there's 3 players that I really think are going to be like breakout players for Texas in fall camp. One that I love that is among the newcomers is Leona LaFau. I think that he's bound to have a big fall camp. I think that he's primed to have a spot on the 2 deep and potentially take over a starting job next year if he can improve as a run defender. The second one that I have is Ethan Burke, and I'm going to put a little like caveat there also with Colton Vasek. I think that those 2 guys are ready to take the next step, is starting with natural pass rushers. And Target, you and I talked about it, that they're putting on weight. Each of them added at least 10 pounds during summer workouts. That's a great sign. And they both improved during spring ball. Colton Vasek, an early enrollee. Ethan Burke, a guy who made a jump on the depth chart in spring ball. I like where both of them are at, and I think they can continue to make strides during the fall. And also, someone has to start at edge opposite Barron Sorrell. We finally need an impact guy there. And then I would say my last one, and offense is really difficult to pick, but I'm going DJ Campbell. I think that it just has to be his time. I'm not going to say it's a make or break year for him, but like he has to get acquainted along the interior offensive line before the move to the SEC. He's just too talented for it not to be clicking yet. Those are my 3 guys, though. Steven, what about you?
So quick comment, kind of going backwards forward to where you just commented on. DJ Campbell's interesting because we are returning all 5 starting offensive linemen from last year, and they started every game. And I agree with you about DJ Campbell for the simple fact that is as much as we value the experience and the continuity that's there with the way Kyle Flood has recruited in the trenches, it does have to be iron sharpen iron. And if you lose your job, I'm not saying who, could be one of the guards, it could be the center, somebody moving the center to allow DJ to play. But the bottom line is if he's one of the best 5, he's got to be on the field regardless of loyalty to previous starters or continuity or anything like that. That's a good problem for Texas, by the way. That is a good problem for Texas. For breakout guys that I have that come to mind, I think it's going to be really difficult to keep Jonte Cook off the field. I understand from a rotation standpoint, the depth that we have there between, the field, the boundary, the slot. There's a lot that I already saw them really working on with Jonte in terms of getting the football in his hands and understanding the playmakers that they have. And if they are for real about running more 11 personnel, I think Jonte will have some opportunities to really make some things happen his freshman year. He seems to be as polished and ready to play as Worthy was 2 years ago. And I think it's going to be really difficult to keep people like that off the field, especially somebody that explosive. On the defensive side, you picked LaCour, and I'm kind of looking at that same position next to Jalen Ford and us really seeing how Jalen Ford plays football without DeMarvion Overshown there, with us trying to incorporate Ant Hill into whatever hybrid role we use Ant Hill with. But the one person I've looked at is all offseason is Maurice Blackwell. Between him, David Benda, Jet Bush, Leona LaCour, all the guys that were there over the spring at that linebacker spot, I think is huge. I just like the way Blackwell plays football. I like the way I call him game speed on my channel. He always seems to go one speed only. I've never seen anybody hit Xavier Worthy as hard as he ever hit Xavier Worthy in that scrimmage a couple years ago. And I think that's somebody that will surprise some people. That's been more of a special teams gamer for us, but I don't know. I just have a feeling about Maurice Blackwell. I don't have much other logic beyond that. Not saying he's going to be an all-conference player or anything like that, but I think that's somebody that we could look back at this season and say, hey, he was really solid contributor for us on defense.
Yeah, 2 things to what you were saying, Stephen. First, Jonte Cook, I got to cover him in a couple games at DeSoto last year, so I've seen him in person. I've seen him in camp setting once too. He like weight-wise on like the website, what does it say? He's at like 175, 180, which isn't small given that he's like 6 foot with cleats. I'm like 6'1", 6'2". I stood next to him. I probably got 3 inches on him, at least 4 maybe. So whatever you want to say there. But he carries that weight really well. He is a lot bigger. You want to talk about body transformations without actually putting on a ton of weight. My God, like the NIL interview that he did a few weeks ago, and then some of the pictures that have emerged from summer. Dude, yeah.
The frame is filling out. Yeah, I see it too.
Yeah. So I like that pick for sure. You mentioned Mo Blackwell. I think he's, obviously in the starting competition with David Benda for that will spot. Who do you think wins that ultimately? I'm going to assume you are going with Blackwell, but don't put words in your mouth.
I honestly don't know, only because I think that they bring 2 different kind of skill sets to the table, and I think it's going to be more matchup based, depending on who plays more. I think David Benda is probably going to be listed as your starter on the depth chart. I'll be honest with you. But when I think about what complements Jalen Ford, what fits best in PK's scheme and what Jeff Choate might be looking for complementary there, I just think that in terms of some of the Big 12 opponents we play, Blackwell maybe aligns a little bit better. I got to see David. My thing with David Benda is the pass coverage and moving laterally. Those are some things he really struggled with last year. I know he can do the run stuff, but in the Texas Tech game, they kept having to take him out. If you go rewatch some of those snaps, he was just really, really lost. And so if I can develop more of an ability to trust him and make some of those strides and have some of the growth that Jalen Ford had with his drops. That's one of the reasons why LaCour is going to come up on some of these guys, because LaCour is a natural at those things. And I look at Blackwell as a former safety, and he's a little bit better with his drops. So that's my hesitancy with David Benda in particular. But if I can see him make those strides, I mean, then I'll sub Blackwell for Benda in terms of my breakout guy, as long as we're getting production from that spot at the will.
Sir, Tarik, I don't know if we went through our breakout players yet for fall camp. I think we just did position battles.
Yeah, I don't think we did either. On defense, I'll say Alfred Collins. I think he's got all the talent in the world. I think this is the year he finally kind of just puts it all together and does something big. I think he's got that kind of ability. On offense, I'm going to say this is kind of an easy one. I'll just say Jonathan Brooks. He can. I think he can keep the Sark 1,000-yard rushing streak going, and he's also a very valuable receiver, and he's got some real breakaway speed. I mean, the guy just runs away from people, as you can, and he does something that now he's not Bijan. Bijan's a very unique body type runner and things like that, but he has an ability to do something that Bijan did well, and that's make a play that's not there. That touchdown, that screen that he made against Washington, I keep watching. It's like, how did this become a touchdown? It's like, and the answer is Jonathan Brooks said, this is going to be a touchdown. He just made it happen. That's invaluable when a guy can just say, okay, I'm just taking over now. And shame on Sark for not just starting him and giving him more carries. I know he was herniated, but clearly he was what was moving the ball that night. So it should have happened earlier.
Isn't that the double-edged sword, Tark? Because I agree with you. His contact balance is really good. I think what you just said about him getting more carries in that game, but them knowing the injury issue he had, that's kind of my concern with Jonathan Brooks all year. Is I don't have a concern of ability. I have a concern of availability. That's my concern with Jonathan Brooks. Can he handle that load that those other guys handled before?
Well, I can say that from a medical standpoint, hernias are not to be coughed at. So, it's one of those things that it's amazing that people with hernias can even stand up, let alone run the football. But it looks keeping him out of the spring, but all while saying he's going to be the guy. I think that that bodes well for him. Torrey Becton and others seem to get these guys with injuries in much better shape within a few years. So I look forward to that too. Though some people are just injury prone, and Jonathan Brooks may be one of those people, but knock on wood. So if he's healthy, and here's another one, I'm going to say this won't sound like a breakout pair, but it is A.D. Mitchell. A.D. Mitchell certainly has skins on the wall from catching touchdowns in every playoff game he's played in, including the game winner in the de facto game winner in the Alabama game. Technically, Kelly Ringo sealed that one. But he hasn't really, because he hasn't been healthy, he hasn't been a go-to receiver throughout the entire season. But this year, he's going to be the go-to receiver. I think the way Quinn Ewers throws, it's better if he has a taller guy who can bail him out from time to time. He has a kind of a higher release there. And he had a very good rapport with Isaiah Nair before Nair went down. So, and it looks like he's got something similar with A.D. Mitchell. So excited to see what A.D. can do.
Yeah, Tarik, like I said, I mentioned A.D. Mitchell among my newcomers that I think could break out in fall camp. And yeah, I mean, I think A.D. Mitchell is probably the most obvious one that will contribute immediately. Tarik, let me ask you this. And actually, I guess, Steven, I can pose this question to both y'all. I think the defensive line rotation is an interesting conversation because you got a lot of guys that are proven to varying degrees, experienced for sure. There's a lot of talent along the defensive line as well. But when you're looking beyond T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy, there are some question marks. Alfred Collins, all the talent in the world. What is he going to do with a larger snap count? Is he going to be more consistent finally? Is he finally going to live up to the billing. Vernon Broughton, can he finally play with the proper pad level? Can he not get pushed off the ball if he's playing closer to the nose, if he's playing like one tech? Trill Carter, I think he'll be valuable in run defense. Good rotation guy. Tarik, do you think that Alfred, where do you think he stacks up in the rotation, I guess is my question. Do you think he's like the third, fourth guy? I'm actually right now putting him around like fourth, maybe fifth.
I would say he's just like, I would say it's going to be Devondre and Byron as the down guys. And then the next two up will be Alfred and Trill Carter. So I think part of Alfred Collins' problem is he's really made more for a 4-3 defense, which is part of why he was happier to come to Texas when they hired Chris Ash, who runs a 4-down front. And even though you think like he's a big guy, he has the body for it, some guys just aren't as comfortable. It's like playing left tackle versus right tackle. Some people just feel more comfortable in certain types of stances and situations. Like Kelvin Banks, they moved him to right tackle at the All-American game, and he was he played fine, but he mentioned like, I'm just not as comfortable dropping back this way. I'm usually used to doing it this way. With Collins, I think him being in the 4-3, where he wasn't taking on as many double teams and things like that, he was more comfortable with that. So, but I saw glimpses last year of him finally starting to get a bit more comfortable with the 3-down or 2-down linemen. So I think he's and also he's been reshaping his body too. He looks a lot thicker and has more of a push. But don't forget Sadir Mitchell. He's gonna play a role. They don't. If Georgia is on a guy from the beginning until signing day, you probably got something there. So I don't expect a huge season out of him, but I do think he'll be important. He's an immovable object.
I think it was really big for Sadir to be here in the spring too, and the fact that he showed out in the spring game. He caught my eye when he was out there. And when you look at the defensive line rotation, Trill Carter coming on board is a big deal just from the standpoint of letting Alfred Collins just focus on 3-tech and having him in a more optimal role and situation when he gets in the game and he gets his snaps to get after the quarterback and to showcase why he was brought here. Not having to worry about gap as much and taking on double teams and some of these other things, or playing 4-eye, kind of like Moro Ojimo was being asked to do, which is great from a positional versatility standpoint. But Alfred Collins, it's not that football player. He's a 3-tech guy through and through. And I think with the focus there and the fact that I expect Byron Murphy and T'Vondre Sweat to play more snaps overall. Everybody's snap counts got to be kind of nice last year because Coburn was so good and Morrow was so good. And you kind of, they had a nice little spread with the guys. But now Bo Davis, I know he's going to be counting on even some of his projects, right? I mean, we haven't mentioned, I think we may have mentioned Vernon Broughton, but you look at guys like Aaron Bryant and Jere Bledsoe. There's been people that have talked about Jere Bledsoe before, what type of recruit he was. We just mentioned Sadir Mitchell. So there's unproven guys there, but there's guys where it's like, okay, can we get together at least two groups where we know we have solid consistency and we know if somebody goes down, we're not hurting, where we feel like our run defense is going to fall off a cliff or we lack interior pass rush. I do think we have enough bodies now to where we should feel good, even if we lose a guy or two throughout the season with those other younger guys coming along.
Yeah, I mean, I say this because I did like a kind of a deep dive the other day where I noticed there was a rather large amount of snaps where there was a two-man combination of a two-down front with Alfred Collins and Vernon Broughton last season, like an uncomfortably large number of snaps with those two on the field at the same time, with no true nose tackle, and that was asking for trouble because all you have to do is double both of them. You move them off the ball, and then you have enormous rushing lanes through pretty much any part of the field you want to in the trenches. So I guess that's more of just a simple fix of like, let's not do that anymore, where, like you said, we put two true 3-techs on the field at the same time, asking one of them to play 1-tech. it's not natural. It's asking for big running plays to happen. Yeah, I agree. I think Sadir Mitchell is going to play a role here. You got to have someone that's going to be a solid true nose. I think Trill Carter can do that in run defense. I don't think you're going to move him off the ball super easily. I like the idea of maybe like a Trill Carter, Alfred Collins duo. I think that could work out okay.
I think that's better than the Vernon Broughton, Alfred Collins combination. They also may stagger Sweat and Murphy. Who knows? That's another that throughout the game. That's the other thing too. This staff rotated a lot in mass packages last year. Do they continue to do that? That's something we won't really know the answer to until the season starts. Because they used to do kind of hockey substitutions at times, especially second and third quarter, to some frustration, right? Where teams, mainly Texas Tech, Joey McGuire sees us in a certain package, and what does he do? Hurry up. I want this group that y'all have out there to stay on the field, right? And so that's something Texas needs to be more mindful of as well, who's playing with each other in certain personnel groupings.
Yeah, and that's the last thing I was going to mention. I'm glad you bring that up because Sadir Mitchell, he's down to 335, which I think is a good thing because I think he's going to be able to carry his weight a lot better than he was during the spring. I just heard that popping up enough to the point where that was like kind of a concern. And then T'Vondre Sweat's really the only one that I'm worried about because he actually added 10 pounds since last season. I don't know if that's necessarily trending in the right direction, but we'll wait until the season starts to judge that. And then Trill Carter took off. I think it was like 3 or 5 pounds, but it sounds like he's been working incredibly hard. I've written a few things at the site about him. So yeah, I mean, all told, I think the defensive line's still going to be solid, but Ojimo and Coburn, they were two of the highest graded interior defensive linemen in the Big 12 last season. Losing that type of mass, that type of versatility up front, that type of disruptiveness, you're not just going to gloss over it. So I think it's important to highlight. Moving on here, and Steven, is there anything else you wanted to mention as far as position goes? I guess Tarik had to jump off for a second.
Well, like you said, I mean, with Coburn and Ojimo, just because we feel optimistic about the guys we have coming back, there's a reason why Ojimo and Coburn were also drafted last year. They significantly improved as football players and showed enough on tape from whether it was versatility, clutch plays. Coburn essentially won us the Kansas State game with the forced fumble and recovery and whatnot, or Jalen Ford on the recovery. But all the plays those guys made, man, we want to see that same leap, right? Because those guys made a leap from 2021 to 2022. They made a leap. That's where it's like, okay, I know what I saw from Vernon Broughton and Alfred Collins last year in the inconsistency. I know what T'Vondre Sweat's capable of when he has his motor fully running. Now we got to go to the next level. I want to see Byron Murphy meet those first team all Big 12 expectations. Everybody knows Murphy is a bad boy, but now we want to have that at least the tape to back up what we already see and know. So those leaps that those guys have made before, we're expecting guys to also make leaps again. And that only will help the staff in terms of their pitch for player development. Because ultimately, what they're going into other, when they go to mom and dad's house and they say, hey, we got XYZ, he became a much better football player from year 1 to year 2, year 3 to year 4, right? And so if Texans keep that up, especially in the trenches, we're going to be in good shape year over year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like part of this too is just like the edge play has to be better because then that takes some of the pressure off the interior line to generate the pass rush up the middle and, collapse the pocket that way. I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces here. Edge play, I think, will be better. Sorrell, another year to mature. I mean, Agofu, he just took bad angles. And I think Burke and Voshik are more natural pass rushers than Agofu. They're both longer athletes. Around the same weight, if not.
They're better suited. They're better suited for PK's scheme. I mean, let's just be honest. And PK, his specialty is coaching those edges, and some of the creative things that he'll be able to do, whether it's their length and hand placement and some of the things that, Ethan Burke was 6'7", 6'8". There's certain things that he should just be able to do naturally, whether it's pass rushing or in the run game, setting the edge, that should just be more advantageous for us than an Ovia Gofu, who gave great effort and was a good kid, and wish him the best at I think he went to LSU now. So, but for what we're asking in this defense, that's what needs to be complimented on Bear Sorrell. And the other thing, too, to your point, Andrew, with the edges, we also need a rotation there, too. We've got to have some people. We got to have some dogs on third down and on obvious passing downs. This is one thing this team struggled with defensively that was really, really frustrating for a lot of us Texas fans, was the long drives, right? They may have been good at holding a field goal, but you think of games like UTSA against Frank Harris, how many 16, 17 play drives, because we can't get home with 4. We can't generate enough pressure to be truly disruptive with just 4. A lot of that comes from the edges. And as well as they played against Bama and the trouble they gave Bryce Young, that was not consistent throughout the season. So we got to get there and have a better group from production from that standpoint.
Yeah, very true. And well, a lot of the pressure that was generated against Bama was from like safety blitz or corner blitz or linebacker delayed blitz. It wasn't, I mean, the edges did play well, but PK found other ways to draw out pressure, as he did for a lot of the season. But yeah, you're right. It's got to be, I mean, it's got to be a whole group effort. I think we know it's going to be there from the secondary. I think that's going to be a really solid group. You have a lot of proven guys back there. Linebacker has some pieces to fit in, but you still have a solid guy back there in Jalen Ford. Yeah, the down front's got to get the job done. Moving on here, you mentioned some stuff about, just player development, being able to sell that in the future as well for future recruits. I want to transition the conversation a little bit. We don't have to spend a ton of time on this because at this point it feels like you're kind of hammering home the same points with a lot of these elite guys. But the 2024 class, you got a lot of the top priorities in this class that are visiting other schools this week or this coming weekend. Colin Simmons going to LSU. Kobe Black, I believe, is going to A&M. Wardell Mack also going, I believe he's going to LSU. You got a lot of guys that are going to be down at the Bayou Splash this weekend in Baton Rouge. And so, I think that this is going to be a really interesting weekend where, depending on what happens with some of these, if I think it's been mentioned, Inside Texas did, if Colin Simmons makes it out of the LSU visit uncommitted, that's a really good sign for Texas, which him shortening the timeline, him teasing a commitment date the other day, I think you have to figure that to be true, especially because I was running down the visitor list on an LSU site today, and there's a lot of elite Duncanville guys going. Caden Durham, top running back, DeCorian Moore, 5-star, awesome. I saw him twice in the 7-on-7 circuit this year. I know that he's really highly rated and everything, but he was fun to watch. I think he was it Texas? I don't know. I would have to look back at the 7-on-7.
I was on the sideline. I was on the sideline for Duncanville North Shore at Cowboy Stadium, nice. and seeing DeCorian in particular early in the game taking the top off. I mean, he's as good as advertised. And seeing those guys play like that in the biggest of moments, even our own Alex January in that game as well, right? So those are guys coming from a 6A state championship team. You already know the type of recruiting that's going on there with those targets. To your point, though, in terms of the visits coming up and some of the rumors that have been there about maybe some guys are silent and some of those type of things. I do think with Colin Simmons, I agree with the anecdote of the longer he's kind of uncommitted, and if that plays out, that can play into Texas's favor, especially if he takes his commitment into the season. I'll put it that way. Some of these kids, and I don't know I know he's teased the date. Has he actually set a date yet? I don't think he has.
He is not.
Okay, so some of these guys. I even think of a Ryan Wingo, who set his date, I think December 20th, right? Some of these guys want to see proof of concept. Let's just be honest. If they see the proof of concept from Texas, I think we're good to go with a lot of these cases, because some of them, not only is it a good culture fit, They have relationships with staff. They have relationships with guys in the class that are currently committed. You know, you think of like a Rubel and some of the other guys in the class. I also look at from a standpoint of filling needs. I mean, that's one of the big sell points with these defensive tackles, right? Some of these numbers are going to look a little shaky going into 2024 in the SEC. And so some of the recent pickups we've had, DeAndre Robinson, and I think we're still targeting one or two more guys, interior defensive line, corner as well. Corner is a number. You know, you mentioned Mack earlier. We lose out on Corian Gibson to Clemson, which is a very contested recruiting battle. Kobe Black is essential. Mack is essential now to get those corner numbers there. So we're also recruiting from literally a standpoint of need as well. It's not just, hey, come to Texas because you're the best at your group. It's we kind of need you from how the numbers are looking. So I think it's going to be a very, very interesting next couple months, honestly, to see how the numbers fall in these classes, because A&M has been picking up a lot of steam too in their secondary, and I don't know I don't know how many spots they have versus LSU and some of those things, but you know, when A&M picks up a guy like a Miles Davis, you know, that's a big spot, right? And so we'll kind of see how this shakes out. The last thing I'll say is this, though: recruit through signing day. Recruit through signing day. Texas fans, Anthony Hill, Colton Vasek last year. This time we were down bad, and the staff kept with it. The staff has been good for the most part, in my opinion, with relationships and really keeping that pressure there, and they were able to flip guys. Now, I don't want that to be the strategy every year. That's not good for our blood pressure, Andrew, but it's not doom and gloom all the time. I know how recruiting can be.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, like, I think it's starting to come into focus now where it's like, okay, the hype has died down from the summer official visit season. It's like, okay, the staff actually has to get this team to perform on the field this fall to get these recruitments locked up. You know, for me, the two positions, or I guess the two recruits, honestly, that worry me the most or that I'm the shakiest on, just in terms of performance on the field this fall, edge, clearly, and then defensive line. Because, you know, we've missed out on big-time defensive line recruits before. I don't mean to keep bringing up DJ Hicks, but that one was flubbed last fall. And so Dominic McKinley and Colin Simmons are the two that I would worry about. I think that Texas is, especially if the wide receiver play is as good as we think it could be, and, you know, we know how good of a recruiter Sark is at wide receiver, we're probably going to get one of those two guys. However that plays out, however that happens.
Point.
I'm not super worried about that one, and we'll be able to recruit portal. I get that these are like really important targets, and we don't want to see Hudson go to Tech, but still, I'm confident in that one. Brandon Baker, you know, I think Kyle Flood has proven that he's like just an ace recruiter at this point. If Brandon Baker chooses to go somewhere else after seeing Kelvin Banks potentially perform at an All-American level this fall, so be it. I have full trust in Kyle Flood in that recruitment. Like I said, it's those other positions. Secondary, I have a little bit more confidence in, but yeah, I mean, I don't want to start spreading rumors or anything, but like Cam Coleman committing to A&M the other day, I think you got to. Did you see that when he committed to A&M on July 4th, the 5-star wideout?
Yeah. So, and that one was the Auburn people thought they had him locked up, right? And it was very unexpected, I guess, in terms of people calling it for Auburn, but then he goes A&M.
Yeah, I don't mean to spread rumors or anything here. I'm more looking at this from like a recruiting strategy and like just the momentum that A&M's starting to build right now on the recruiting trail. If A&M has a big season combined with, I'll be honest, I don't usually see Auburn writers just out in the open saying something that NIL definitely had something to do with it. It's not often you see that. And so I'll take that for what it is. When A&M's starting to make moves like this, though, momentum on the recruiting trail is a real thing for them and LSU right now. Like, what's going to happen with a guy like Kobe Black? What's going to happen with a guy like Wardell Mack? So, you know, you're like, if a guy like Manny Muhammad or Derek Williams comes in and is able to make an impact this fall and look good, and, you know, you got Ryan Watts headed to the NFL next year and he has an all Big 12 season, I think I have a hard time seeing Kobe Black not ending up at Texas. I have a hard time seeing Wardell Mack not considering Texas, at least, like you said, through the finish line. because he is a really important guy. Although I really do like Santana Wilson in this class. I think he's very, very underrated. I think he was a solid get. Yeah.
Especially pedigree.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I'll leave it at this. The two guys, if I could have any two guys in this class, I'll go three because Kobe Black and I think Colin Simmons are the must gets at this point. I'm also adding in Brandon Baker. I think that McKinley would be huge, but I do I think DeAndre Robinson is like a high 4-star caliber player. And I really like Alex January. I think those two guys are really underrated. And the fact that Brandon Baker could come in and kind of be like that next Kelvin Banks, I don't think you can undersell that value. So those would be my three guys. I don't know if you have any quote unquote must get recruits. I know we kind of talked about the positions of need and everything already.
I want to give Bo Davis some credit because I was on his behind about some of the defensive line takes recently, and quite frankly, we when you look at the Georgias of the world, the Alabamas, the guys at the very top, there's certain areas and certain recruiting where they win. You're talking about us. Okay, it's great. First of all, quarterback, receiver, we recruit the hell out of it. That's great. I don't want to lose that. It's helping Texas tremendously from a volume recruiting standpoint. But when we think about what's the fastest way to the playoffs in college football, I've always said it's through that defensive line and building the way that they should. And that's why, to your point, if anything ever clicks with Texas A&M, they do have the personnel there that they've recruited over the last couple of years to make them formidable. I'm still convinced that Jimbo and my boy over there now, aka Neck Brace, Bobby Petrino, they might get in their own way, but we'll see, right? But in terms of that's how you need to recruit on the defensive line, is my point. And Texas has not done that, even with I'm with you on Robinson. I think at the end of the day, when all the rankings, he had like 62 offers or something, some crazy number. That will work itself out. Go get me some war daddies, though. Come on, it's time. It's time, bro. I need those Jalen Carters, those people in the game that people don't even want to line up against us, bro. That's
I completely agree. I mean, I don't think you're right. There's no other way to the top. And I don't mean to dwell too much on Bo Davis because I do think he's trending up right now with defensive line recruiting. And I guess I'll say this is what we were talking about. I would assume that Dominic McKinley would be one of your quote unquote must gets if that's perspective on it. He would be my number 4 in that group. But yeah, that completely fair. I will say to your point that when you look at the SEC scope and knowing that Bo Davis has an SEC background, he always targets SEC defensive linemen. I feel like we were in way too many battles with the Mississippi schools, with Texas Tech and stuff it's too many Melvin Hills. Even I get he's like an upside guy, but we beat out Ole Miss. Ole Miss is not a trenches recruiting school. Lane Kiffin likes to make his money from getting those skill guys, having a solid secondary, linebackers that have speed and space. They can cover range. That's the sort of thing. And so you're right that, we need to see that recruiting go up to another level. And, it's going to take time, and it does look like it's trending up right now. But you got to hit home with, you just got to get one. You got to get one. You got to improve the play, and then the floodgates can open. So
if you get a signature guy in that group and it's with the Melvin Hills, the Alex Januaries, the DeAndre, and all those other names, now we're cooking. I'm fine. But you got to have one of those signature threats, if you will, where it's like, wow, this guy could come in and give me snaps right off the bat and be a freaking difference maker in the trenches. That's what we're talking about. Because, I mean, to the point earlier about your concerns this season, we're talking about guys like Jere Bledsoe. I'm still waiting for you. Aaron Bryant, I'm still waiting for you, right? I mean, we can go down the list of some of these guys who we think can be something, but those are guys who were 3-star, low 4-star type recruits who needed some development. They need to get their bodies in order. Now we're at a point where we're running out of time, quite frankly. So got to get with it.
I agree, and I don't want to dwell on this for too long. Of like, pound the alarm. Defensive line recruiting needs to be done now. The 2025 class of in-state defensive linemen, I get it's early. It doesn't look like the best cycle at the position. Like 2024 is already kind of a down cycle for Texas, at least among like true interior defensive linemen, like some of those bigger dudes. 2023 was decent. 2024, like 2025 might be the worst one yet of the 2020s. So you gotta get it done while you can now. Hit home now, and then figure it out after. You can hit the portal. You're in the SEC. Go out of state.
Supplement the room. Yeah, I agree. I'm not hitting the panic button yet. I think it needs to be emphasized, and it needs to be and that speaks to how well the rest of the staff has recruited, quite frankly, because we are nitpicking. I think there's going to be people commenting on my video and told me I was being too hard on the offensive line at one point. I don't give a damn. If we want to get to where we want to get to, we need to nitpick. That's what the good teams are doing. If you go listen to Georgia YouTube, they breaking down the third string tackle like it's life or death over there. Okay. So if we want to be at that level, we got to talk at that level. That's all I'm saying. So yes, Andrew and I are here right now breaking it down to that granular of a level, because look, if we're satisfied with being an 8-4, 8-5 team and being South Carolina when we get to the SEC and have some nice seasons every now and again, then keep doing what you're doing. You're already there. Keep doing what you're doing. But if you want to get to the SEC and hit the ground running, these are the trends we've recognized in recruiting in college football that Texas has to follow. So it's nitpick. I'm not saying Bo Davis needs to be relieved of his duties or anything like that. That's for guy in the comment that's gonna inevitably say something, because they always do on my channel. But shout out to you guys. Hit the like button.
Yeah. I guess last thing I'll say on this, I was just reading something interesting that actually some good nuggets over from Horns 24/7. They just put in a crystal ball for Nigel Smith, I think the top rated defensive line recruit out of Texas in the 2024 class, him to Oklahoma. Looks like OU starting to make more moves with defensive line recruiting. But
OU's picked up steam in the last couple of weeks on their end, recruiting wise as well.
Yeah, but they are putting more. They're putting more because they landed Jaden. They landed Jaden Jackson. They are putting more into. I think that's how you say his name, Williams Winery, the number one guy in the nation in the 2024 class, and then David Stone. So, considering all that, they've already got Jaden Jackson in the boat. I think that's good for Texas with Dominic McKinley. OU still very much involved, but this report as well very explicitly states that they're under the impression that OU and Texas are in pole position ahead of A&M and LSU. So I think that's encouraging for the defensive line recruiting. If it can be an OU Texas battle for McKinley, knowing the recruiting momentum that OU has with the other guys, that should bode with. That puts Texas in like a spot where it's like theirs to lose, I think. All right. I think we've talked a good amount about recruiting. I guess Tarik, Tarik's got a newborn, so he sometimes has to hop off. But
we understood. No worries.
Yeah, I think we can probably wrap it up here. I don't know if there's any other topics you wanted to talk about. We're running up on an hour though, so.
Yeah. No, just thank you guys for having me on. And I know, we're going to continue to touch on this football team and cover from all angles in terms of the Texas media sphere and the Texas YouTube sphere. But I think those watching out here, you can hear the excitement in our voice. Even when we are being critical of certain aspects of the roster or have certain questions, there is a better sense of optimism and higher sense of expectation than we've had in the past. And I do want to, and as hard as I've been on Sark, because he has to show me he's a winner. That's the number one thing you got to do as a head coach. You got to win. And that's it's the first thing we grade you on. But beyond that, the roster management is why we feel the way that we do. Some of the sparks and things that have been shown over the first 2 years, win or lose, is why we have that excitement in terms of what the product could look like on the field. So The roster management by this staff, the continuity by this staff, I've been very impressed with their professionalism, and the fact that they've gotten guys in the player development business. They're getting guys to the league again. These are all strengths that we got to now translate just into wins. That's the last part, really, for me. Before all my questions are answered. But Andrew, thank you for having me on the show, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, love to have you on. And I said this, I've said this before, but whenever we get into like this deep a conversation about like the upcoming season, especially with fall camp this close, it really feels like it feels like the first game is Saturday. You can kind of feel it, how close it is now. So whenever we do videos that run a little bit longer, we like to give some parting shots. Video we did with Nick, we each went around and gave one bold prediction and then one game that we were looking forward to the most, whether it's just one you're excited to watch, one you might be going to, whatever that is for Texas. What are those for you?
So, bold prediction. I'm gonna go with. This is a good question. I'm gonna go with this. Ja'Tavion Sanders leads his team in touchdowns in terms of touchdown receptions. I think with as much as I love Xavier, and I think Xavier Worthy, you think about red zone wise and the route running and all the space he's going to create, it's insane. I think that there's a natural connection with Quinn Ewers that we saw from the very beginning between him and JT Sanders. That kind of gotten put on hold after some of the blocking issues we had. People forget how many times we had to keep JT in line, even on passing plays, with some of the challenges we had. He didn't get deployed the same way he was being deployed earlier in the season. I think you see us get back to that. I think he's a guy that when we think of who's the toughest person to just flat out guard on our football team and kind of the oddest matchup, I think he's going to be a consistent answer to those things, and I think he ended up leading our team in touchdown receptions this year, which is a big deal because you talked about Nair, you talked about AD Mitchell, and all the amount of touchdowns that Worthy's already put up. That's my bold prediction there. And then the game I'm most excited about is actually against OU, and I want to see them with their quarterback. No excuses. It's a game I love going to in Dallas, and I already know that's the one game where we probably will get the Ferris whistle in the Big 12 this year, out of all the games, considering.
Yeah, no, that's 100% true. Yeah, I will say though, at least the teams that barring TCU, at least the teams that Texas usually just gets done like really dirty by the refs in the Big 12, Oklahoma State being the elephant in the room. Like, you don't play Oklahoma State this year. Who else do you avoid? West Virginia always has some weird stuff. And so I think you're missing some of the games where that might happen. So, and then you got the newcomers. I think it's a fair point that like some of the refs are probably going to leave the Big 12 after this year. So, what stake do they really have in it? I do believe that, yeah, it could get rough at times, but I'm trying to keep an optimistic outlook for it.
Me too. But what's your parting shot, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, so I'll start with the games. I'll say games because one that I'm really looking forward to on August 25th, I'm headed out to South Oak Cliff. I think it's South Oak Cliff, Duncanville. Season starts hot in South Dallas. I know you said that you're in the Metroplex. I myself am in Oak Cliff. I live in Oak Cliff, so it's great for.
Oh, we're not too far from each other then. Perfect.
Yeah, not too bad. And so it's shot right off 30. But yeah, it's a great spot for high school football, obviously, and high school hoops for that matter. I'm big college. Me and Shane both on the side, big college basketball guys. But yeah, that one's going to be awesome to get the season started. Duncanville's just a juggernaut. And then, it's a tie for me for the game I'm most excited for because I it's almost a three-way tie. I mean, the Alabama game does excite me, but like there's a lot of games in the Big 12 that I'm going to the TCU game. My girlfriend's a TCU grad, so we had a little bet
I'll be there as well.
Yeah, we had a little bet a couple years ago where we went, and that was the only Big 12 road game that Texas won, and so we had a bet going where we brought a stuffed Bevo. If TCU lost, you had to carry around the stuffed Bevo for the rest of the day. We went over to Joe T's and everything after. It was fun. Definitely one of the high points of that season. Yeah. So I'm excited for that one because like I'm sure that all those November road games that like TCU fans, they get questions of like how loyal they can be and stuff like that. It's fair. It's not my favorite atmosphere that I've ever been in, but TCU fans are one of the more agreeable fan bases too. So I'll leave it at that. Yeah, OU, I'm really, really excited for. I'll actually be down in Austin that weekend, weirdly enough. And then the other one, Texas Tech, I will probably be out of that game as well. It's so interesting to me that the final Big 12 game that we play in, like during the regular season, won't feel like Black Friday at all because we're used to these early kick games that like have like 3/4 of the stadium filled because it's 11 a.m. on Black Friday. And it's like usually like two mid-tier teams in the Big 12. Maybe Texas is an upper tier team this year or that year. But like, the Roschon game where we beat Kansas State. Game last year against Baylor. That was great. It was nice to see the win. But
right.
Yeah. So this year isn't the kickoff announced already? Isn't that going to be a night game?
It's already been announced? I didn't know that's already been announced. I thought they normally wait on those. Oh no, you're right. It says 6:30.
Yeah, it's a night game on.
It's a night game because that's our last Big 12 game. So they don't even care.
But here's the thing, too, though. Texas Tech could very well be in Big 12 title contention at that point. I think they're one of the better rosters in the Big 12. So this is a really, really big game. That one I'm really looking forward to. So
also probably the most trash talk between
yeah.
teams, fan bases, because Joey McGuire lit a fire last year, right? For several reasons, as well as how that game concluded in Lubbock. And just with everything going on, I mean, you factor in Chris Beard into there, every single thing that's gone on between Texas and Lubbock and us, that's the last big event. I know we'll still have Big 12 basketball, but in terms of football, that's the last time we get together. Oh, it's going to be heated.
Yeah, and I don't even know. I think they played Tech once in Big 12 back because the conference slate's been announced for like the host venues in the games, but I don't think the dates yet. I don't even see that.
I hope we drop 80 on them.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a good feeling about that game right now, but like it's going to be an interesting one. That's for sure. So anyway, my bold prediction, this is very bold, but anyone that watches the show or follows Twitter page like closely knows that I'm a big Jahdae Barron fan. Big fan of his game, big fan of his production.
Love it.
I think that he's been like in the scope of the Big 12. I get that just the scope of the Big 12, whoever votes on the all conference awards and stuff just does not like Texas, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Jahdae Barron, I'm not going to say first team because I think that's even for bold, outlandish, but I think he's a second team All-American at the end of the season. His production last year, especially when you kind of like take a deeper look, it's insane. He led all Power 5 defensive backs and defensive stops last season, one of the highest graded defensive backs in the Big 12. And if you look nationally, there's a lot of good defensive backs. I don't know how many great defensive backs there are. And so I think that he could slip his way into the All-American conversation. like I said, I like his game. I think he's the most versatile defensive back that we have. So
I'm right alongside with you there, Andrew. I tweeted when the Big 12 released the all Big 12 teams. All I tweeted was justice for Jahdae Barron. We are now first team all everything moving forward. That's what I mean. The violence in which he plays football, he really understands that star role, which is really difficult role to play. in terms of man coverage, understanding zone responsibilities, understanding that you have responsibilities like a linebacker in terms of run fits, and as a blitzer. He does everything well, and he's only going to be better this year. I'm all in on Jahdae Barron. I don't think that's a bold prediction, but that's a bold prediction I agree with, Andrew. Well said.
Thanks. I guess that's more of like an educated guess than it is a bold prediction. I don't even remember what my last one was. I guess if I was just to have more fun with it, let's say Alfred Collins is the first round pick. There's a bold prediction for you. First round NFL draft pick next year. There's one I'll just throw out. See how that sticks.
Brett Auburn's going to win the Lou Groza Award. Let's get crazy.
Whatever award there is for best ginger afro, he can get that. I love that. Because I remember the first time I was watching a game with my parents and my girlfriend, Bert Auburn kicking, and they were. I got the question, why does my hair? Because I mean, I'm a redhead, so why doesn't my hair have that kind of volume? And so I'm just never gonna live up to it. But yeah, I think it's. Yeah, I think special teams is in good hands. I guess I'll leave it on that. I guess that's a more boring note to leave it on. I think that unit's going to be better. Overall, that's all I got. Any other things you want to say, Stephen? Before we get going?
Thanks for having me on and Hookem, man. This is going to be fun. I can't wait, and I'd love to have you guys come on Fanatic Perspective as well. And you know, whenever we do some lives or anything. Just straight up fan interaction over there. Not full blown, conspiracy theory, tinfoil message board talk, but great fan interaction, and that's what we talk. So appreciate you guys having me on. I really do. Thankful for it.
Yeah, thank you for coming on and getting such a detailed show. A lot of content for this one, that's for sure. Like I said, it gets me really excited for the season. But anyway, for Stephen, Andrew, that's pretty much it. Welcome.